Hello, everybody, and welcome to our CFIB webinar with the Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, who's here to sort of chat with you and tell you a little bit more about their new digital platform called CARM, and they're going to tell you all about it. So we're excited to have them here. So we're going to sort of jump into it fairly quickly. Before we do, though, a few pieces of information. One, my name is Corinne Pullman. I am the Senior Vice President of National Affairs and Partnerships at the CFIB. I'll be sort of moderating and hosting to a certain degree, but most of the work to be shared with you are going to be from our guests at CBSA. We have Vladimir Omazik, Regional Subject Matter Expert for this particular platform we call CARM, as well as Megan Wambolt, who is with Deloitte and is a manager of CARM stakeholder engagement, who has been working with the CBSA on this new platform. In addition to them, we have a couple of our advisors on standby. We have Rachel Eng, that many of you who may have come to our webinars before may recognize, as well as Andrea Simos, who is also going to be helping out with questions in the background. So just if you hear from one of them and when you get to questions, that's who they are, and they are with the CFIB and also helping out. Before we get started here, just want to remind you that in the chat right now is a copy of this presentation. So if you want to go into the chat, you'll see a copy of it there that you can click on and download. That'll be available for the next little bit. But if you have a question, we would ask you to use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen and put your question in there. It's a lot easier for us to access those and go through those. If you put it into the chat, we may miss it. So we prefer, if you can, to put them into the Q&A. That would be very much appreciated. We'll try to remind folks of that as we go through the process here. So what are we going to be talking about today? Going on to the next slide. We're going to obviously go through the presentation with the CBSA. They have about a 15-20 minute presentation, and then we're going to go straight into questions. What we are hoping you're going to get out of this today is really understand what the requirements are going to be for going online. That's for importing, which is now going to be going online. So obviously, if you're somebody who has been importing in the past, is going to be doing some importing in the future, some of this maybe is going to be very relevant to you. This whole transition towards a more digital online platform for importing is going to happen in phases. Currently, it is still somewhat in the voluntary stage, but it is going to move into a mandatory stage. And our friends at CBSA will tell you a bit more about that. However, even though it's only voluntary, it's not too early to register. And part of what we're going to talk about today is how you're going to go about doing that. What does it mean? And how does it all work? But before we jump into the presentation, I thought I'd ask a few questions. Yes, John, it is mostly for importing because CBSA deals with importing. But your first poll question that we'd like you to answer is, are you familiar with CARM? So please take a moment, answer the question. Yes, are you familiar? You've heard of it, but maybe not that familiar, or you've just never heard of it at all. So if you could take a minute, answer that question. All right. What do we got for results here? All right, so it looks like it's fairly split. About half of you have heard of it, but you're not familiar. There are a good 1 in 4 here who are familiar with it. That's great. And another 1 in 4 who've never heard of it. So we have a good mix of folks. And so hopefully this will help get you further along the path of understanding what CARM is. We have one other poll question she wanted to ask you. It's how often do you import right now? Is it more than once per week? So you're a fairly frequent importer, a couple times per month, a few times a year, or really not that often at all, rarely or never. So just take a second and respond to that. All right, and the results are very good. We have a lot of folks who are fairly frequent importers, as well as those who do a couple times a month. So that's 2/3 of you. And then if another 1/3, I guess, are in the more few times a year or to rarely or never. So hopefully all of you will get something out of this today to understand what this is going to look like going forward. So without further ado, we'll move on to the actual presentation from our friends at CBSA. So I'm going to bring Vladimir and Megan back up and turn it over to you for the next little bit. I may pop up here and there to sort of clarify a few points as necessary or as needed, but I turn it over to you. Thanks again for joining us, Megan and Vladimir.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be here and to talk about CARM, which is the CBSA's assessment and revenue management, which, as Corinne mentioned, is about going digital and going online with importing into Canada for commercial purposes. So even if we go to the next slide, even where we look at the real vision for CARM is to deliver a globally leading customs experience that is client-centric, facilitates legitimate trade, improves compliance and revenue collection, and as well contributes to securing the borders of Canada. And as we look at this, one thing that will be clear throughout it is that this really is for commercial purposes. This is not affecting individual travelers going across the borders, but it's really for businesses importing into Canada. And we'll go into a little more details on that. But if we're just going to the next slide, even where we talk about the benefits. So how is CARM helpful for Canadian importers? Really, a big thing with this is going to be that it's self-service. You're able to really complete your registration, including delegation of authority if you work with third-party service providers like brokers or consultants, and that you can do other things like program enrollment, you can do payment adjustments, as well as submit and track rulings and appeal requests, and all of that can now be done online. So really going from a paper-based processes to online. And for anyone that has registered on the portal already, there are some of these features, you can do these today, and there'll be more coming in the future with the next release. So then another thing that's really great about CARM and the future of this is visibility. So you'll be able to see your account information online, very similar to how you see your banking information online, and you can really access it easily. You don't have to wait for statements to come. You don't have to work through other providers per se to be able to see your account information, and that you can also receive automated billing and payment notifications as well, that you'll be able to get notifications to your email, which will be things such as something perhaps is due, or something if you enroll in RPP, which we'll get into that a bit later, you can get notifications or nudges of when maybe you're coming close to your limits on that. Then another piece with this is efficiency. So this actually will also eliminate some of the burdensome processes and tasks related to a manual paper-based process. And you'll be able to submit supporting documentation online, which again just makes things a little easier for everyone when carrying out these transactions, especially if you ship your goods in through other providers. And then finally, even support. You can access information and support easily through the portal, and we'll go into a little more of what that is as we go through things. So just going even to the next slide here of really, well, what is the CARM Client Portal? Before we get too much into the nitty-gritty details of this, well, what is the portal? The portal is, a online website or portal where you can access your account. And this really helps to cut out some red tape around different ways of accessing your information. And it is, to be clear, it's completely free. And all businesses in Canada that import into Canada currently have the option to register. However, it's not mandatory. It's not a requirement today. And any changes to that obviously will be communicated in the future. But it's, like I said, it's very easily accessible online.
So just to confirm, it's not required right now, but it will eventually become something that every importer will have to use, right? If I'm understanding correctly.
It's there. We don't want to say that it will be a requirement in the future.
Okay.
But there definitely, if there's any changes in the requirements of importing into Canada or changes to the requirements for importing into Canada, such as anything related to the portal, that would definitely be communicated in the future.
Yeah, and I can add to that. Like once we get to release 2, it will be difficult for you to clear goods if you're not registered on the portal, right? So the portal is really going to facilitate that for you. It's at your advantage to be on the portal. So really, by release 2, you should be registered. You should have all the delegations in place to ensure that there's no delays to your shipments.
Okay. So it may not be required. However, it'll make your process a lot easier if you are registered and part of the CARM system. Okay.
Yeah, it would be very, very difficult to interact with the CBSA going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. And then, so just thinking of that, going forward with CARM. So when we think of it, there has been a phased approach to this. And so as we see on the next slide, even here, where there was a release 1, which happened in May of last year. So we're just coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that, which was really basic portal introduction. Definitely very voluntary of registering on there. And we've had really good uptake of TCPs registering onto the portal and starting to already use it to look at their account, view statements, and use some of the tools that are available there, even to help with like classifying goods, as well as the ability to request advanced rulings. So all of that is available today on the portal. You could go on today and try to register, or even you can do that next week, and we'll get into more resources that are available for helping you to register. But really, then we're moving towards what's called release 2, which will be in the future, and there is still some work being done to confirm the exact date on this, and we'll definitely communicate it through the CFIB to get that information out to everyone, so that when we're going live with new functionality. And so with that, even there's going to be the ability to register and enroll in CBSA programs, which will be a great new feature there, that you can do that online, and that you even won't need to do some of registration or enrollment processes through other government groups. You could do it all through the CBSA as it relates to your business for the things that you need to do to import into Canada. Then also there'll be customizable electronic notification options. So specifically, we often think of is with the release prior to payment. So with that, you'll be able to get notifications that'll, or nudges when you're reaching your limits on that, and you may need to increase your limit, or you may need to just make a payment to reduce the utilization on that. And then also even a new functionality will be the ability to submit new commercial accounting declarations, to make corrections and adjustments, as well as even there'll be harmonized billing cycle that will align your payment due dates and provides more time to make interest-free corrections. So there will be all these new functionalities coming in the future, and there'll be more information available on the specifics of that later as well. So who should register is a question that we do get on this. And obviously we do want to clarify on that. So as I've already spoken to, this is in regards to commercial goods coming into Canada, not individual travelers. And this really goes across a number of different scenarios, which could be you import 1 or 2 times a year. Yes, you need to register on the portal. Your importations are low value. Still need to register. But also even it could be that maybe you're working with a broker or another third-party service provider. You will still need to register on the portal, and you can still continue to work with that broker or other service provider, but you'll just need to delegate access or delegate authority to them for your account. And there's different levels that you can delegate to them, so that then they can continue to conduct business on your behalf.
So there are lots of questions about delegating authority already. So I suspect we're going to get into that a little bit, right? So I just wanted to let folks know that we saw that some of those questions are coming in about delegating authority, and of course questions around can they still use their broker or not. So I'll put that in front of you as you go through and think about. Those are questions that are certainly coming in already. But I also just want to make it clear that on this slide, all of these scenarios mean you're going to have to use CARM at some, like you have to register on the portal. So for every single one of these scenarios you see here, you still have to register if you're bringing commercial goods into Canada. So back to you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, yes, exactly. For all these scenarios here, you do need to register on the portal. And that's really important to understand, because it can be thought of maybe, well, maybe this is just for bigger importers, or maybe this is for frequent ones, or for that goods you're selling or goods you're not using, or all these different scenarios, which we did try to cover a number of them here on the slide here. So definitely, you know, if you feel yourself saying like, well, wait, but does it apply to me? You know, and one of these scenarios comes to mind, yes, it does apply to you. And it also does apply to, if you do have a broker, you still need to register. Your broker also needs to register, which many brokers, the majority of brokers across Canada, have already registered on the portal. And they may even be sending you some information on this, which is fantastic. And you can definitely work with them in the registration process. So that sums up kind of the who should register and what really is CARM. And I'm going to turn it over to Vlad now to talk a little bit more on the onboarding and registration process.
Thank you, Megan, and hi, everyone. So yes, this slide here kind of just illustrates the 5 steps that are required to onboard on the portal. I'm noticing a lot of questions that are related to kind of onboarding, and folks have already onboarded, so that's a good sign. But really, we'll go through this quickly. So step 1, again, based on the poll answers that were shown, most of the companies or most of the folks online should have a business number and CBSA program account. So quickly, what is a business number? A business number is a 9-digit number that's issued by the Canada Revenue Agency, and it's really attached to your legal entity, your legal business in Canada, and it identifies the legal entity, and then followed the 9 digits is 2 letters, and the 2 letters, depending on the program, identifies the program, the government program, right? So for the CBSA, the 2 letters for import-export is RM. So we have clients that have a CRA account, so a GST account as an example. So that would be identified by RT. You would not be able to onboard with the GST number. You have to have an importer-exporter account in order to register on the CARM portal. So if you have a business number, you would just go to step 2. If you don't have a business number and you are conducting commercial activity, you would need to go to the Canada Revenue Agency at this time to get yourself a RM account, an importer-exporter account. So once you've obtained the number, you go to the next step. So this is an important kind of I need to highlight this for everyone, is that every individual user, so regardless if your company has 1 employee or 10 employees, every individual user has to create their own personal account, right? They have to create their own access account in order to access the CARM portal. So as a user, you'll have 2 options. You can either sign in using the GC key. A GC key is a government service that allows individuals to access government information, right? It allows you to access a government website, a government portal. So GC key is one option. Another option would be a sign-in partner. So we have partnered with, I think there's about 15 banks. So basically, you're just using the sign-in credentials of the bank, and it would take you to the next step. A question we get often about the sign-in partner is, would the CBSA have access to my banking information if I use that method? The answer is no. I want to assure everyone that, you know, it's just a sign-in method. Again, we've partnered with the banks. If you choose to use a sign-in partner, you just simply use the same sign-in parameters that you would for, say, the Royal Bank, and it would take you to step 3. So step 3 is really the first step in step 3 is to register the business. So really, the business is only registered once. So your RM account is only registered once, right? So the first user that registers the business, they become the business account manager by default, right? So they kind of take ownership of the account. The remaining employees, so you only have to register the business. So if you have a company and you have 10 employees and you want all 10 employees to access the account, the first employee who registers the business would become the business account manager. The subsequent employees would simply be requesting access to the business. Because the business is already registered, those employees would be requesting access. And it really becomes the business account manager's role to kind of grant access to their employees, right? So that's kind of step 3 and how that works. Step 4, and I've seen quite a few questions on delegation and how that process works. So basically, I kind of mentioned it with the employees. So once the business is registered and the business account manager has been identified, again, it's the first person that registers. That person then is going to receive requests from their broker asking them to provide access to their account. So that request is a one-way request. It has to come from the broker to the importer. The importer cannot send the request to the broker. So what will happen is once the broker has signed on, they will request access from the importer, and you as the importer, you own this information. So you decide what that broker, if you want to grant that broker access, and you also decide what that broker can see and do on your behalf. It really is the first time in CBSA's history. I've been with the CBSA for 25 years. Again, my expectation is that most people will continue to use their customs broker, right? And there's many benefits to continue to do that. But it really gives importers who use customs brokers, it gives them the visibility as to what those brokers are submitting on their behalf. So basically you can, the broker would continue, once you've delegated the broker would conduct business on your behalf, but you have full visibility, right? So that's the benefit. You see exactly what that broker is submitting on your behalf and what is being done on your account, right? So that's a big benefit for clients that use brokers. If you're a client that doesn't use a broker and does things yourself, there's many benefits to CARM as well. It basically allows you to facilitate that paperwork, to kind of communicate with the CBSA electronically. It really simplifies the whole process if you're onboarded and able to communicate with the CBSA via the portal. So once you get through step 4, which is delegating your own employees and delegating any brokers that you have, you're ready to conduct business with the CBSA. Again,
well,
this is yep.
I thought I would just jump in here because I see that Lori and Kathy have a few questions about the whole confirmation temporary code email that you receive when you in order to log into the portal, and it seems like they're referring to potentially having issues. Is that something that you're aware of or that's been fixed in terms of receiving an email code and by the time that it's received, expired?
It's a multi-factor authentication. So it's just like a step, it's an extra step. I think if you use a banking account or a similar process, I think they give you the option of texting it to a cell phone or an email. So that's kind of the same idea. With the CBSA, we only allow it to be sent to an email address. So basically what happens is once you've signed into your GC key, it'll make you go through the MFN process. We have encountered some issues with it. I mean, sometimes it has to do with the security settings on the user, right? The user has certain security settings that's restricting. Again, in cases where it should work seamlessly, in most cases it does, you should not be experiencing problems. It is not normal for you to experience problems with this. If you are experiencing problems, we recommend that you contact the help desk and they'll be able to walk you through it and correct the issue. They'll be able to identify why you're having this issue and they'll make sure that it doesn't continue going forward.
Cool. And I think at some point, another member was asking, how easy is it once one business account manager leaves to replace pass on that account to someone else? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as part of the, in the next 2 slides, we're going to get into some documentation, but the CBSA recommends that you identify at least 2 business account managers, right, for this specific example. So, in my example here, I said the first person that registers the business becomes the business account manager, but subsequent employees, once they're requesting access to the account, you could grant them access to the business account manager role as well. So there's no limit to the number of business account manager roles that can be within a company. So again, I'll use the example of a company with 10 employees. All 10 employees could assume the role of business account manager. The CBSA is recommending at least 2, and for this reason, right? If one of them were to leave, then another one would be there to kind of maintain, and then maybe appoint another person to assist them with the business account manager. In instances where maybe you haven't followed the direction, or you just haven't decided to issue another role as a business account manager, there is a way to get around it. You would have to call the CARM support help desk, and they'll be able to kind of go get around the business account manager to be able to identify somebody else. But again, if you only have one, you'd have to call the help desk. If you have more than one, then it's no problem at all. That other person has the same responsibilities as the original business account manager.
And it sounds like it's much easier to change those accounts and those access of delegation earlier on than it is after the fact, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, the business account manager, yeah, for sure. It makes sense that you set it up properly in advance, especially if you have more than one business account manager, it's seamless. Because they have full control over their account. I use the example of an access card to a building. Really, I mean, the portal, like the business account manager controls who gets access to the building, right? So if there's only one person responsible, everyone else trying to get into the building is going to have a hard time. Again, the workaround would be to contact the CBSA, and we'll get around that issue. If you have more than one person who controls that access, then it's not an issue at all.
Thanks for that. I'll let you continue on.
Okay, so we'll just jump to the next slide. So this slide, again, the registration process, especially when you're registering the business, I mean, there are some questions that an importer has to answer. Again, we have heard some concerns with respect to the complexities regarding these questions. It is understood that, a lot of importers who rely on brokers might not have this information, right? So the first thing you need to do, I mean, this is a cheat sheet, right? It's available on the CARM onboarding section of the portal, and it really provides you in advance of registering your business. So if you haven't registered your business, I'm encouraging you to kind of print this sheet out, and it kind of allows you to fill in the information so you have the answers in advance of registering, right? So it helps you prepare in what's required to get through the registration process. Again, if you're an importer that doesn't use a broker, it should be fairly straightforward for you because you'll have access to all the information. So there's basically, you'll need to be able to match the legal address name. So we have to have, it has to be exactly punctuality, capital letters, periods. The address has to match exactly to what the CBSA has on file. You would get that information with any correspondence that the CBSA has sent you. So a statement of account as an example, right? So that's the monthly statement. So if you have one of those statements, you will see the address you are to use that address. And then you have an option to answer 2 out of 3 security questions. Again, the questions are, difficult if you do use a broker, and then you will have to contact your broker to get that information. The 3 questions that they will ask, or that you'll have to answer, are recent transactions. You'll have to give information on 1 of 5 recent transactions. You can give us a last payment that you made to the CBSA, or a last monthly statement of account. So those are kind of, you'll have a choice of 2 out of the 3. A lot of times you will need to go to your broker. If you do encounter issues, if you still can't identify the right response, you will need to go to the CARM Client Support Help Desk, and they'll help you walk you through that and make sure that you get registered properly. Okay, so we'll just go to the next slide.
Just quickly, so you said that they should go to the Client CARM Help Desk. You're going to provide, I think, some information on how to contact them, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because I think that there are some people who are curious to know how to do that. Thank you.
For sure. Okay, so this slide here kind of speaks, I mean, CARM is a portal. It's an online portal. It provides visibility. I mean, I encourage everyone at R1, you should be onboarding as soon as possible because there are many benefits. I mean, it's for you basically have access to your information. It's similar to your bank account. You have access to your financial transactions. You have access to what is being submitted on your behalf. At R2, there are some significant advantages and significant changes from an operational perspective that CARM is introducing. So one of the biggest ones is we're moving away from the B3 customs coding form and the B2 adjustment request, right? So that is going to be replaced by the commercial accounting declaration. So there'll be one form that covers adjustments, it covers declarations, it covers corrections. You're only going to refer to one form, and the big win here is on the adjustment process. So when you do have a refund request, maybe your broker submitted an entry and the preferential treatment wasn't used, and now you want to use the preferential treatment in order to get a refund. At this time, our adjustment process is paper-based. Our service standards are anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So you're not going to see that posting of that refund for 3 to 6 months. With the CARM portal and the commercial accounting declaration, you'll simply be able to go on the portal. You'll click on the transaction directly electronically. You'll create a new version. You'll make the adjustments. And in most cases, that refund will get posted automatically to your account, right? So that's an example of kind of a key benefit of what the portal will provide importers. Another thing that's changing is
just wanted to jump in there, Vlad. So just a question that I see here is, does this mean that will B2s and B3s still be accepted after release 2, or is it just being transitioned out?
No, the B2 and B3 will no longer exist at release 2. Right. So once we go live, the B2 and B3 is going to be replaced by the commercial accounting declaration. Now, the only caveat to that is, prior to go live, you will have B3s that were submitted and you may want to do an adjustment to it, right? So that's going to follow a little bit different process because you are adjusting a pre-CARM transaction, which would be a B3. So that'll follow a little bit different process than if you're adjusting a CAD declaration. You'll be able to do it on the portal electronically, but it'll follow a little bit different. The steps will be a little bit different, but definitely, the B3 and B2 forms will no longer exist. The commercial accounting declaration will replace both forms.
So I guess another strong incentive to register onto the CARM client portal for sure.
Yes, and if you have a broker, your brokers will be able to submit those commercial accounting declarations electronically via EDI. Brokers have EDI capability. I mean, that's one of the reasons you're using a broker, is that they're able to submit electronic information directly to the CBSA. So they'll be able to submit the commercial accounting declarations electronically. And something that's very new to brokers is they'll also be able to submit your B2 adjustments. So if you use a broker or a consultant to represent you for the B2 process, the current B2 process, the brokers in the future will be able to submit those electronically to the CBSA. So we're moving away totally from paper. Like I said, the adjustment process today is paper-based. It's a 3 to 6 month service standard just due to the volumes. With the CARM portal, the broker will be able to submit it electronically, and most cases it'll get posted directly to the account. So that's a big change. Another change, again, we have different, pre-CARM. So today we have different due dates for many of our invoices. A different due date for a B3 if you're a release prior to payment participant, a different due date for a B2, and so on. So any invoice that we issue you today has a different due date. With CARM, we are going to align the due date. So any invoice, either an adjustment or a declaration, it follows the same due date. So if you have release prior to payment, which we'll talk to you about a little later, but basically release prior to payment allows the deferral of counting and payment to after release, right? You get the release of your goods and it defers the accounting and payment. You need financial security to participate in release prior to payment. And in most cases today, a broker represents that security on your behalf. So that's another significant change that's happening at R2. is that brokers will still be able to submit those release prior to payment requests. Again, release prior to payment requests are submitted electronically to the CBSA. It's pretty seamless. The broker is able to submit it electronically. The CBSA receives it electronically, and the service standard is 45 minutes. So once we receive it, we are releasing those goods within 45 minutes, unless it's been held for exam. So at R2, the change that's happening is that each importer, if they want to participate on release prior to payment, so if you want to defer accounting and payment, you will need to have your own financial security in order to participate in the release prior to payment. Now, there's two types of releases that the CBSA has. It's a cash entry or pay-as-you-go entry. There's no impact if you are an importer that pays as you go, or a cash entry. That would be a paper-based release. So you won't be able to submit releases electronically. There's no change for you other than the CAD. You'll be able to make those releases. If you are enjoying the privileges of release prior to payment today through a broker, you will need to post your security.
I just want to slow you down a little bit, because that was quite a big paragraph that you just gave us there. A lot of information all at once. And just acknowledge the fact that I see Loredana and Janice, you guys are definitely mentioning that, you know, a lot of this work that you have that is really unfamiliar, right? Because you'll be using a customs broker, and up till this point, the responsibility hasn't been on you to check who has to pay when these fees have to be paid to CBSA, are really keeping in mind what these documents really look like. So it sounds like these responsibilities are definitely going to be put on to businesses, kind of in the way that taxes are responsible to the business itself. But, you know, you can have an accountant, you can have a customs broker. Is that kind of the right idea?
I mean, yes, but if an importer that uses a broker today, really, I mean, if they use a single broker and they want that one broker to conduct business on their behalf, make payments on their behalf, they can continue to have that relationship. It's really a conversation between the broker and importer on how they want to go forward with CARM. The difference with CARM that's changing the relationship is because we're making this change to financial security, we're no longer tagging an importer transaction to a broker, meaning an importer, we have many importers for a variety of reasons that use multiple brokers. And each one of those brokers today, obviously, they only want to pay their own transactions on behalf of that importer, right? So that's allowed today because we do something called broker tags to the transaction. At release 2, and we'll accept payment from anybody toward an importer account. That's not a problem. The only difference is that a broker will not be able to control how that payment is allocated against the importer account. The payment will be allocated against the oldest debt, regardless of who submitted it. Meaning if another broker submitted that entry, that payment would clear the other broker's transaction. So that's why it's a conversation that I encourage importers to have with their brokers on how they want to approach the payments at release 2. But from all, other than payments, really, if you use a broker and you expect them to conduct activity on your behalf, submit the CAD, submit the adjustments, I mean, they can continue doing that and it will be seamless. If anything, the benefit to you in that situation is you have now full visibility. You know, today a broker provides you an invoice of what they submitted to the CBSA, and you trust that that was the information they submitted. You really don't have that visibility. With CARM, you know, you hire the broker, you expect them to submit that information to the CBSA, but now you can validate what exactly they've submitted on your behalf, including that line level detail, the tariff classification, the tariff treatment, the country of origin, you know, to make sure that the broker is representing you the way you want to be represented, right? So it gives you full visibility. Sorry, Rachel, do you have another comment?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've already touched on, maybe it's a good time. We're seeing a lot of questions about customs brokers when you have multiples of them. I don't know, Corinne, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key here, I think, Vladimir, is that they want to understand whether they now have to do all of this work or whether the customs broker can still do pretty much most of the work once they delegate authority to them, right? And I think what you're saying is that once they've registered their business, delegated the authority to the customs broker, and put up the bond, then the customs broker can pretty much continue to do everything on their behalf. Would that be a simplified way of saying what you're...
Exactly. I mean, for the most part, the only caveat is that payment part, right? If you have multiple brokers, the payment becomes a little bit more complicated from the broker's perspective. From your perspective as an importer, I mean, they're going to clear your importer debt. It doesn't really matter. But that broker payment, right? I think those are the conversations. Now, if you're an importer that only uses one broker, so you've only delegated one broker and that's it, that's the only broker you will use, yeah, it'll be seamless. They can do everything they do for you today. So, you know, and again, the benefit is visibility, right? You can go onto the portal
right.
and you see.
The advantage there is you can now see all the transactions that the broker's done on your behalf.
The transactions, and like today, like the B3 data, that accounting information, you have to request that from the CBSA, right? Yeah. You know, they send you like Excel documents. You'll be able to go on the portal and you can run reports on any information that any broker submitted on your behalf. It really is a win for the importers.
Yeah. And what about folks who use shipping companies for their now, right? So they use FedEx or UPS or whoever, right, to do their importing because they only do it a few times a year, or whatever the case might be. How would it work in those scenarios?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the express shipments or the courier releases. So we have a large proportion of commercial importers that only have clearances via express shipments. So today, in today's world, a lot of times what happens is that express shipper, I'll use FedEx as the example, is actually using their business number to facilitate the commercial shipment for your entity or for your business, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's allowed, and that's the way the process is. But at release 2, FedEx will no longer be able to, they'll be able to release your goods, no problem. They'll be able to release it. You'll still get your just-in-time goods. It'll be seamless. But when it comes to the accounting, FedEx will require a business number from yourselves as the importer. They will have to actually submit a business number. So that's the change, right? They will no longer be able to use their own business number to facilitate a shipment on behalf of an importer. So that's why every importer, so there are cases today. So I have importers come to me today and say, I import all the time, but I don't have a business number, right? And the reason that has happened is because they are using express shippers, and the express shippers are facilitating it with their business number. In the future, these importers, if you don't have an importer number today and you use express shipments, you'll definitely need one at R2. So I encourage you to go to the CRA and get that number.
Great. So maybe we should move on so we can get into questions. I know you have 1 or 2 more slides to go.
Yeah, this is just the CARM Client Support Help Desk. Again, I think you guys have a copy of the presentation. I encourage you to click on the web contact form. It takes you right into the prompts. Again, based on your prompts, it'll take you to the CARM support team. So we have dedicated resources in the CBSA that are just responsible for CARM. However, just for everyone on the call, this help desk is actually, anytime you need help with the CBSA, regardless of what the issue is, this is where you can go, right? Either the web contact form or the telephone. It depends on the prompts where you go. So even if you have a traveler question, you can use the same web contact form. The prompts kind of direct it to the right area. So this, I've mentioned it a few times throughout the presentation. Like if you have an issue with onboarding, if you're having an issue with multi-factor authentication, if you're having an issue with the security questions, these resources are ready and they're available to assist you, right? So they understand what you're dealing with and what you're going through. So they'll walk you through the process to make sure that you're able to onboard successfully. Okay.
Great. I know just because we're running out of time, yeah. I think one of the areas that I think it might be worth spending a little bit more time on is around financial security. So we're in the appendix of the presentation that everyone should have downloaded, hopefully by now. There is a bunch of slides that get into that. So we have a lot of questions about how to get the security, how does it work, all that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind going through some of this for the next few minutes. So
sure. Maybe if we can just go to the calculation slide first, just to kind of level set, and then we'll get into the different options. I think maybe the next slide. Next couple of slides. Next one. Yeah, this one. Thanks. Okay. Oh, sorry, the one before. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so this slide kind of illustrates the different options that importers have. Basically, you have two options. You can post a financial security instrument, which includes a bond, but there's other types of financial security instruments. It's in our D memos. I think it's D171. If you're not familiar with the D memos, it's on our website, but you can send a note to the CARM engagement box and I can kind of share information with respect to what the acceptable forms are. But basically it's either a surety bond or you can post a cash deposit, right? If you're going the surety bond perspective, so it's basically 50% of your highest monthly accounts receivables in a fiscal calendar year, right? So if you're, if you have $50,000 as your top receivable in any particular month, you would be expected to post security of $25,000, right? So you go to your surety provider and you would ask that they provide you a bond for $25,000. The cash deposit, again, the cash deposit is going to be really seamless and easy for smaller importers with, smaller resources, like, less resources a month. So if you're an importer that has, say, less than $500 a month, you only have a few importers, only imports a month, but you want to kind of participate on release prior to payment. Maybe, you're a cash client today, but you're looking at this and saying, okay, so I can submit $500, I can submit a deposit for $500 and you would be participating in release prior to payment, right? So the next two slides go over, how you would actually follow through on either option. So if you choose the cash deposit option, again, it's simply a one-time deposit, right? You would go to enrollment on the CARM portal. Everything's done on the CARM portal. You would enroll in the release prior to payment program. As part of that enrollment, the system is going to identify what your accounts receivables are. So you'll get a message. In my example, it would say $500. You would then post a payment for $500, and then you would be on the release prior to payment program. It's that simple. The takeaway for cash deposit is we hold the money in a separate account. So it doesn't get allocated to your account, but it is your money. Again, we're not paying interest on it, but as an importer, it remains your money. And as soon as you want to withdraw from the release prior to payment program, the entire deposit is refunded back to your account, right? So it's basically we're holding the deposit. If you want to participate on release prior to payment, and again, as a reminder, it defers accounting and payment of taxes. It allows a broker to submit electronic entries. As soon as you don't want to participate, you would simply withdraw from the program and the CBSA would refund the entire deposit. Again, seasonal importer, as an example, this might be an advantage to you, right? If you only import during the Christmas season, you might want to take advantage of this, right? Because we would only be holding that deposit for a very short period of time, right? You would simply, say you're a Christmas importer, you would submit the deposit maybe in November and you would get it back in January, and you would be able to facilitate those releases during the holiday season, as an example. If we can maybe go back to the couple of slides earlier, which talks about, next one, sorry. Okay, so this one is what the CARM is going to actually facilitate the process if you want to use a financial security instrument. So basically an importer is going to have a couple of options. So the first thing you have to do is you have to obtain the financial security from an approved provider. The link there provides you a list of providers that provide surety or financial security instruments. So that, you have to be on this list, the Treasury Board contracting policy list. So they're the ones who authorize companies to issue these security instruments. So if you have to identify one of these companies, you would go to one of these companies, you would obtain that security at the amount that's required. So in my example earlier, it was $25,000. So then what happens then is the financial security information will either be provided to the CBSA directly in the portal by the approved provider. So you go to the surety provider, and then that surety provider will go into the portal and validate that it's there. Or the importer themselves go on the portal, enter the surety information, so the bond number, and then the CBSA will relay that information to the financial security company, who will then validate that the bond is actually valid. Once that happens, you're active and you become a release prior to payment participant. The difference between this and a cash deposit, again, a cash deposit, full refund of the amount. Surety company is not going to offer you a surety bond for free, right? So they're going to charge you an annual fee. Think of it as insurance, right? It's the same kind of idea. You're paying an annual fee that's not refundable, right? So if you do withdraw from the program, yes, you'll no longer need that bond, but the surety industry is going to keep that fee. Again, someone with larger receivables, 100% it makes sense to use a surety bond. Someone with smaller receivables, if you're specifically under $500 or in that range, right? I mean, probably makes more sense to do a cash deposit. But again, it's an importer decision.
So I think what needs to be clarified too is this is only required if you're going to do release prior to payment, correct? Is there an alternative? So say you don't want to put up a bond, what is the alternative to doing release prior to payment? What happens if that is the scenario?
So the alternative is what happens today. We refer to it as a cash entry, but what really we are saying is it's pay as you go, meaning that you can still have releases. It won't be electronic, so you'll have to submit a paper release package. You'll have to go to a port of entry with full accounting, so all the information has to be there, and you have to pay for the entire shipment prior to release of those goods. So you will have that. You have that option today. You will continue to have that option with CARM, right? It's called the cash option, pay as you go option. So if you're not a release prior to payment participant, your only option available to you is the pay as you go release option or the cash release option.
So I think that's important for folks to understand. So this is in regards, there is another option if you don't have a lot of volume, you don't need it necessarily immediately. There is another way to go about doing this. Vladimir, we can't see you anymore. Your camera has sort of like, so
yeah,
it'd be better. Thank you. So I think that's
just want to, yeah, we also have something called, with COVID, right? We have something called an e-long room where we allow, certain ports of entry have been allowing this cash entry to be sent in via an email. So you still have to have the full hard copy paper release package, but you're allowed to send it in via email to participating ports of entry. Again, the information is on our external website if you're interested and you are a cash client. And basically, it kind of follows the same process as if you walked into a port of entry. The only difference is you have to present the PDF via email.
Yeah. Rachel, is there something you wanted to add?
Yeah. I just wanted to share that it seems like a lot of the comments coming in, the comments are blowing up, I have to say, and a lot of people seem to think that $25,000 is a lot, is a maximum for a surety bond, or 50% of that, sorry, for your imports, your highest monthly accounts receivable, and then 100% for your cash deposits of the highest monthly accounts receivable is quite a bit. That just seems to be the reoccurring theme that I'm seeing towards right now.
Yeah, I think there's some concern that the amounts are pretty high considering how difficult it's been for small businesses recently. So that's just to give you a sense of the flavor of the feedback that's coming in regards to what they see are fairly large amounts that they have to put up front, right? So
I mean, we understand it. For lower receivables, the cash deposit, I get it. There's no interest. You're not getting any interest on it, but it is your money, right? So that 100%, although it sounds like but really it's yours. And if you could even go month to month, especially for importers that only have a couple of imports a month, you can basically kind of time it in a way where you kind of participate prior to the imports and then you just enroll and get the refund right after those imports. So again, that's an option that's available via the CARM portal, and the portal is going to facilitate that for importers, especially smaller importers.
Maybe it's better for me to just pick out one in particular. Hopefully Janice doesn't mind. But they have a container of motorcycles that is valued at $170,000 2 to 3 times a year. Do they have to post a bond for half of that?
It's the duties and taxes, right? It's not the value of the motorcycles, but if they wanted to, and they only import 2 times a year, is that what
2 or 3 times a year? Yes.
I mean, in that example, I mean, I would suggest that maybe the cash pay-as-you-go option is more appropriate, right? You still have the option to release goods. I mean, you know.
I think the important thing to point out here is when you talked about accounts receivable, you're not talking about the actual value of what is being imported. You're just talking about the accounts receivable for CBSA, which is the duties and taxes associated with that shipment.
Yes,
correct?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So I think that's an important clarification here, is that it's only the duties and taxes of that shipment. So 50% of that value is what needs to be bonded, not the entire value of the shipment. So
yes, thank you, Corinne.
So I think that should have highlighted. Yes, that I think is a bit of what was confusing some folks on that particular piece of it. Great. Is there anything else, Vladimir? There are lots of questions that we may still want to come to, but is there anything? We only have 5 minutes left, so
no, I think
we can go over a little bit if you're willing to, but
of course,
we have certainly answered some of the questions as we went along, but there are certainly others that are coming in. So I'm going to just sort of tap into some of the ones that have been sort of voted up a little bit more that we haven't touched on yet. One of them comes from Nancy, who's asking, what recourse do we have should a shipping company clear a parcel rather than going through our designated customs broker?
Yeah, that references again back to the express shipment process. And again, it's based on your terms and conditions. When you sign up for an express shipment, really you have to be careful with the terms and conditions, because within those terms and conditions, it clarifies to you how those goods are going to be cleared, right? So that's your first step. I mean, from a CBSA perspective, we don't get involved in the business to business relationship, but the only caveat there is CARM is going to change that for you, improve that for you, because in that situation, the express shipper will not be able to do it at release 2 because they won't have your delegation, right, to do the accounting, right? Even though they have their terms and conditions to release the goods to you, if you don't delegate them in the portal, they won't be able to do that. So you can control your broker to submit those goods in the CARM R2 world, but today it's a little bit tricky.
Right. Okay, so another sort of question that's come up, and this is also from, I think, earlier on when we started this whole webinar, Lori was asking, how are limits determined for companies? We've never had our current broker talk about us reaching any limits. Are these limits on imports or limits on taxes and duties due?
I'm not sure I understand the question with respect to limits. I mean, we don't, were you talking about the minimal limit for the security? Like CBSA, any limits? Like there's a minimum bond level of 25,000. Again, it's only based on your highest accounts receivable of duties and taxes. So duties and taxes would be your duties and GST for the most part, right? Now, the limit of 25,000 would be applicable to, say, someone who has a maximum of duties and taxes of 20,000 a month. Even though half of that is 10,000, we have set a bare minimum. The bond has to be at the 25,000 level, even in instances where you might be below the threshold, right? So that would be the limit for that.
Okay. And then I think, Megan, there's a question here that we were hoping to ask around, my broker offered to set up the CARM account. Would that make them the administrator at this point? And as such, I would need to ask their permission for access.
Yeah, and even just a final point on just what was just talked about with like limits and just, you know, just to make it really, really clear on that, there are no limits on how many goods you can import into Canada. There's nothing changing with that at all. They can continue to import as much as they like. However, it is in regards to, I'm guessing with the question, maybe it is in regards to the financial security component, and that there's limits on what you could import if you're in RPP because of your coverage level based on that, which is what Vlad was even speaking to of the 25,000 or the different pieces with that, of the limit comes into play with that you just may not have your coverage for that. So, but yes, so with the question, in regards to your broker registering on your behalf to portal, it definitely, you know, with anyone registering to the portal, whether it's an employee or someone external to the business, you are providing confidential business information to the employee or to anyone else. And so that's definitely, you know, your decision as a business of who you share that information with. But if you are running into any challenges with registering on the portal, please do call the help desk and they can help out with that. Something to keep in mind even is that it could be, the call could be about 30 to 40 minutes to get through the whole process to register, but they can very much help you with that. And if there is more information that's needed from your broker, because they do work closely on your account, then they could help with what information it is to get from them even. Okay. I hope that answers. Corinne, do you think, is there anything still in that might need to be further clarified? I
don't think so, but I encourage folks if they have comments up, but Rachel may.
No, I was just getting ready to ask him some more questions because they're still coming in hot and heavy.
Yeah. I want to say it is 2 o'clock. If it's okay for guests, if we go maybe 5 minutes over or so, let's just take a few more questions. And obviously you understand if people have to go, but we do know that there's a lot of questions we're going to try to get to quite a few as possible. So over to you, Rachel.
Yeah, hopefully this can be a quick one. Will there be linkages to my CFIA for permissions and permits?
No, the CARM portal will not be linked to the CFIB portal.
Okay, and then another one having to do with structuring and the CRA RM account. So if we have many companies within a corporate group, do we still have more than one access to CARM, or can we link the business numbers and do the same CARM login?
So at this time, the login is limited to the BN9. So you could have multiple RM accounts attached to the BN9. That is no problem. You'll have access to all the RM accounts. If you have a different business numbers, so different BN9s, that the login will have to be separate. So you have to identify 2 separate logins. So you'll have to either log in with a GC key on one of the accounts or the sign-in partner or a different GC key on the other account. We are exploring options to see if we can maybe make that more efficient or client service centric, meaning allow the user to see both BN9s, but right now there is a restriction. It's limited at the BN9 level.
Okay, and then I just have one more and then maybe I'll pass it back to Corinne. Corey asks, what will our drivers have to cross the border if they don't have a B3?
The drivers, there's no change to the release process. So if a driver is presenting a B3 today, they'll be presenting a CAD hard copy document. Again, I'd have to understand the scenario, but there is no difference to the release process itself. So there's no changes from a freight forwarder, from a transporter perspective. That should be seamless for them.
I'm trying to be a little optimistic. Maybe it might even be easier to just pull up the CAD on their phone if they have access to it, right? The driver.
I think it becomes, the driver is not the importer, and without getting into all the particulars, really, it's really the importer, the customs broker that needs to present that release package. But I understand that different ports of entry, there's different things that happen. But generally, for that question, yeah, it would be a hard copy piece of paper, CAD.
I'll pass it back to Corinne.
So there are lots of questions. Some of them are, a lot of them, as you can imagine, around the bond process, about the confusion around accounts receivable, which I think we have now clarified, which I think is a good thing. Certainly some around registrations as well. I think the overwhelming feedback in the chat room is they would like another webinar where the opportunity to ask more questions. So we may need to have you or your colleagues back at some point in time, because I think there is a lot here for folks to digest and understand. So, I don't necessarily know if we have time to get into a lot more questions. What I might do though, is we're gonna do our best to our members out there. We're gonna do our best to try to get back to you. If you don't feel like your question was answered here today, I would encourage you to actually call either the CBSA helpline. Maybe we can get that back up on the screen, that CBSA help desk line. And you're always, always welcome to call CFIB as well. We have many advisors like Rachel and Andrea here in the background here trying to answer some of your questions. So I think that may be the best point to stop here, because I think we're kind of running out of time. I did want to give an opportunity for Megan and Vlad to say a few more words, but perhaps if there's anything you'd like to say before we depart. Megan, do you want to go first?
Sure. Just thank you to everyone for attending this and for their interest and asking the questions for transitioning onto the portal. We will continue to share more information on the different changes that are coming. Certainly we don't want anyone, feeling unsettled or feeling a panic to do certain things, especially when it comes to the financial security things, which we know definitely has implications and there's definitely decisions to make on that. We'll continue to share information out through CFIB as well as through our email distribution list as well to help with the transition. So, and Vlad, anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, and then I echo comments about, having more time, right? I mean, there's a lot of information to digest here. We went really quickly, right? I mean, the bond information, I mean, we could spend hours discussing kind of how that's going to look and how that's going to be processed, right? I mean, definitely a lot of information on the adjustments. We did, it was really fast. So yeah, I mean, I can assure everyone, I mean, the CBSA is here to assist. I mean, I do think you will find CARM a benefit to you as an importer. It is really going to change the way things, and it's going to become more efficient. The response times will be quicker and things of that nature.
Yes, and again, I want to thank you both for joining us here today, and I want to thank everyone who has stuck around. We do appreciate all your questions and your comments. We're reading every one of them. We are going to do what we can to also provide information on our own website about CARM as it rolls out. We will be also trying to get more information. We will certainly invite CBSA back again to try to get in more in depth. Maybe we'll focus on a couple of the areas that seem to be causing the most questions so that we can maybe dig a bit more deeper into those. So thank you for your feedback. We will be sending out a follow-up email to each and every one of you. So with some survey questions, so feel free to give us comments and feedback there as well so we can improve these going forward. A final thing, of course, call the CBSA Help Desk, call CFIB's help advisors as well. We're always here to try to help you out as much as we can. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I want to thank Rachel and Andrea in the background to also trying to help answer questions. So with that, we're going to end the webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.